All right, this is going to be an editing video, so it is not for everyone, just to be forewarned. This guy sent me a script to review or edit, and much to my surprise, it was good. But since I kind of assume that people are reading less full-size books nowadays, and since you're already in Comicsgate, or at least you know about it, why not think about converting this over to a graphic novel? It's just something to consider. This is going to be for style and content, not the final grammatical editing. First, the big picture. You want to sell to your biggest audience possible, and I know I talk about racism in comics quite a bit, but too much racial issues, people are just not into it, and it limits your audience. I know that you think it's important to the story, but this is a commercial enterprise for you, I assume. So here's the thing you're forgetting. This is a guy's story, and the guys who enjoy this kind of bayou noir detective tales, they just don't care about race or how black somebody is. If the protagonist is a light-skinned black dude who looks like Denzel, that's enough for them to form an image. You don't need to get more detailed than that. You say something like, he looked like Stephen Curry if Curry had spent 4 years in Afghanistan. Something like that is good enough. You want to appeal to a wide audience without losing the spice that makes the character special. How come I can't pronounce Bayou Noir. Elmore Leonard said he writes, then he tries to edit out everything that isn't dialogue. So you want to keep that in mind. Think, how can I trim out the wordy bits, make it as short as possible, but no shorter? And I've read a ton of this type of story, like James Patterson, James Litt Burke, Robert R. McCammon is really the one I'm thinking of. Similar stories that are set in the swamp. You got a private investigator or a low-rent attorney. He's a little seedy. He drinks. He might do a little drugs, but he's got a moral center, or he's about to take part in a redemption arc. So this book vibe is very much Robert R. McCammon. Very, very similar. He wrote swamp stories with a hint of the supernatural, and he's very good at knowing his audience. And your audience is male, 12 on up. Unless you want to throw a little romance in there, which isn't a bad idea, and then you can probably open it up to a female audience without alienating the male audience. I didn't read the whole thing yet, but I did enough to get you started, I think. So you want to cut out all the repetition. If you think you wrote something particularly clever, you probably will end up editing it out. I know exactly how that feels. You want to look for trite, overused phrases. Just excise those. Don't over-describe things that are obvious to the audience. One scene in the book, you describe the front of a hotel. Fine, that's cool. You talk about the architecture, the French influence. That's all very interesting. But then you contrast it with how seedy the back of the hotel is. It just goes on too long. We know what a back of a hotel is. We're very familiar with it. It's the industrial part. We know that you can just skip all that kind of stuff. Also think about the character's motivation. Maybe I wasn't reading carefully enough, but there's a story set among prostitutes, and I don't know anything about prostitutes, but I'm guessing that prostitutes don't care about anyone but themselves. So unless there's some special reason for a prostitute to care about another prostitute, I kind of don't see it. First sentence has got to be a banger. It's got to be perfect. This first sentence is too wordy. A murdered hooker was as common as a stumbling drunk on a Saturday night here in St. Denis, but this particular dead girl was interrupting my Sunday morning. Way too much, way too long. I would say something like, in St. Denis, a dead whore was as common as a drunk. Something like that. Period. Next sentence. And this dead girl was interrupting my Sunday morning. You refer to the hands as inhumanly large, but then later on in the story, you refer to the guy as being about your size, so that doesn't quite make sense. And then you refer to his education level. I know per capita seems like a fancy term, blah, blah, blah. I know me some fancy words. I went to law school. It's just unnecessarily. It involves the race stuff nobody cares about. And then there's some, this isn't quite alliteration, but it's the cadence of the syntax of like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And you repeat it a few times. You do things like, a violence that close to form a fist, comma, a fist of death. Death for the sad painted ladies who chose their clients poorly. Death for their illegitimate children. Death by disease or needle or blade. This is like college writing way too. And I mean, don't take my. And this is a good story. Like you're 75% of the way there, and you've obviously they have the talent of a real author, comparable to these other guys. But everyone gets edited. Editing is brutal. I know that myself. So this cadence, it's just too long, too wordy. It's too flowery. This kind of prose. You're not writing to your audience. Read that book Gone South by McCammon. He is excellent at knowing his audience. So you do something very similar here. The weather. So you bring up the concept of the weather. Swimming, describing the weather. Piss warm, summer rain, more describing the weather. Coming in sheets, describing the weather. Coming in sideways, the weather. St. Denis shower, more on the weather. You get where I'm going with this? There's too much of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Repetition, it's just unnecessary. It's wordy, it's flowery. Cut it down, make it as short as possible. And very similar. You do some of this in the beginning, and then it seems like you leave it behind. I hope the call is about a case. Something small and grimy. 1, or I guess it's 1 is there. 2. A quick turnover. 2, with a fast payday. I wasn't above little debt collection. 3, strong arm work, and I could use the cash. 5, it's actually even more than that. The syntax and the content, there's too much of this. It's just, okay, you could use the work, and we know you're a CDPI, and you resort to all kinds of different work. Tighten all this stuff up. This kind of repetition, cut this stuff out. Oh, something about the flask. Wayward flask? I'm not quite sure the flask is wayward. And there's grammatical errors, but like I said, I'm not going to edit the grammatical errors, because assuming you go through this a few more times, there's going to be a fresh crop of grammatical errors and typos and spelling errors. That's just the nature of the beast. It doesn't matter how perfect you are. You're gonna see things in your head, and you're gonna skip words, that kind of thing. Okay, but if it involved working girls, it involved trouble. 1, played right, trouble. 2, was money, played wrong, it gets you dead. 3, it's just, there's too long, too repetitive. We get the concept. She sounded scared and angry. 1, angry over whatever. 2, angry she was. 3, forced to ask for help. 4. You see where I'm going with this? There's just too much of that kind of thing. Okay, then this is an interesting technical question about, I'm not sure if it's duty of care, or there's a famous Terasoft case on, this is kind of under evidence, and evidence, there's rules of attorney-client privilege, doctor-client privilege, psychiatrist, priest, pastor, penitent privilege. There's all kinds of different privileges under the law of evidence. And so it kind of deals with this in state licensed employees. But she's a client, she's on the phone, she's asking a very reasonable question about the privileges of confidentiality and the duty of care and that kind of thing. She's asking a technical question. It's very reasonable, and he blows her off. It doesn't make sense. In an earlier paragraph, you just said he needs a client, and this is an opportunity for him to give her a little education on whatever his duty of care is and his liability is to his client, who he wants to hire him. So it doesn't make sense for him to blow her off like this. And then he moves to hang up, more the same. Oh, and then this comes in the motivation of a prostitute caring about another prostitute. I'm not sure they do that. She was behind me every step of the way. I didn't like that. I like space to do my job. Why does that bother me? It bothers me. I don't know exactly why. Mainly because a lot of this stuff, these paragraphs are just repetition. So I would try to cut out all that stuff. Again, the prostitute she's talking about, she's denying her drug use. People deny drug use only to other people who matter. And this guy's a CDPI. And she's a prostitute who's doing drugs. I don't think she cares that he knows she's doing drugs. It just doesn't seem, the motivation just doesn't seem to be there. And then there's another thing, is you have these people doing some sort of powdery drugs, but I'm not sure if you mentioned if they're stimulants or depressants, because the behavior of people is going to be a little different. You got the cop who's doing some kind of powder, and it felt like it was a stimulant, like cocaine or something, but then you have him nod off in the car. So, okay, that means he's doing a depressant. So you got to keep all this stuff in mind, this kind of continuity of cars and drugs and Liberty devices, settings. You might even have to draw a picture of stuff. Like you You can't have a car that's an automatic and then have it mention him shifting gears as if he's actively shifting gears when it's, it might be an automatic. That kind of stuff. You got to be very, very careful about that kind of thing. Sometimes people will have revolvers shift to automatics. And actually, that brings me to another scene in the swamp where there's a shooting. Someone fires 3 shots. And you didn't say if it's a revolver or an automatic, but usually automatics are, I don't know, it doesn't say, but as a part of evidence, you didn't mention what happened to the shell casings. So 3 shots from automatic are 3 shell casings that have been flung out into the swamp somewhere. And if the guy's concerned about evidence, he's going to retrieve those casings. Or if it's a revolver, he's not going to worry about it because the casings are still in the cylinder. This kind of repetition. When a hooker is killed, 5 gets you 10. It's a John, usually the last one she had. Look for every opportunity to cut things out and shorten things out. Okay, this is... I'm glad I'm at 11 minutes. Okay, you've got... I don't know the first thing about prostitutes, so I do have a T-shirt from a whorehouse as a tourist stop, but we didn't partake of the wares other than to buy a T-shirt. Okay, so you've got a black prostitute or brothel that specializes in black girls, but they don't take black clients. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm guessing the most desirable prostitutes are white girls, not black chicks. So if it's a black brothel, it's probably the clientele is probably anyone with money, and probably black guys are more likely to go for that. White guys are probably not going to go for that. They're going to go for Asians or white girls are the 2 most desirable categories. So... and prostitutes are probably going to go with anyone with money. If a black guy shows up and he's got his whatever amount of money, they're going to take care of him. That's just... Anyway, some of this stuff, hookers and drugs were just the spleen, important but taken for granted. No. I knocked on the door after I already opened it. Old PI trick. No. This kind of stuff where you make the sentence and then you follow it up after a comma, explaining the sentence, stuff like that. If you can get rid of it, get rid of it. She's talking to the private investigator, who I guess is mixed race, and she said you was stuck up, thinking you was white, better than her. I would leave the racial stuff behind as much as possible. There's one scene where you drop an N-bomb, and it's okay because someone's angry and they're using the N-bomb as an expletive. That's fine, but all the other stuff. I'm just editing this from a commercial aspect. I mean, you're writing this for other people. It's like this isn't your own personal story. You're looking to disseminate this to a paying audience. And writing something cool is one thing. It's very easy. To write something funny is pretty easy too. Even to write stuff that people enjoy. They read it, they go, yeah, it was pretty funny, man. I really enjoyed the story. Getting them to pay for it, that's a whole nother level. Getting someone to pay for a product, and this kind of reminds me of Mike Miller's Lone Star. Maybe I shouldn't have said that. There was a grammatical mistake where he confused your and your. Absolutely not. That is haram. He should be caned, publicly caned for having a grammatical error. It's either your book is professional or not, and you can't have, and I know this is in the early stages, but you cannot have grammatical errors or even typesetting errors in anything that is going out to the public for money. If you're putting this online for free, that's one thing. But anyway, you get where I'm going with that. Sorry to throw Mike Miller under the bus, but those kind of errors. Okay, again, you're talking about character motivation. This is prostitute talking, and you have the private investigator, who are private investigators and attorneys, depending on what area of law if you're a criminal attorney or private investigator, you're already kind of seedy, not to throw criminal defense attorneys under the bus, but you're already kind of seedy. I mean, you're dealing with this lifestyle, you're around these people. You're definitely known for associating with fleeing felons as part of your job and undesirables. So it's like police attorneys, criminal attorneys, private eyes, they're already in the life. They're not Captain Save-A-Ho, is what I'm saying. She speaks to him. She says, that's why you hate her, hate hookers. Oh, you do this kind of repetition too. That's why you hate her, comma, hate hookers, comma, because we take money to let people use us and hurt us. One, the syntax is too wordy. Hate us, comma, 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 da, da, ba, 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 ba. And and the whores, I'm guessing whores don't talk like this because they're familiar with Captain Save-A-Ho, and the private investigator, there's no way he's going to be a Captain Save-A-Ho. The only thing he might do is, like, if he's familiar with the 12 steps, he might be like, oh, hey, he might be interested in the 12-step program, and he'd probably leave it at that. That's what attorneys do, so I'm assuming that's what PIs do. I mean, the whole concept of the 12 steps is like people want to save themselves. You can't save somebody else. That's you have to you control yourself, not other people's lives. And if you're dealing with the criminals, then you learn that very, very quickly. This kind of stuff you're describing, you switch from dialogue to describing settings, again, with the Elmore Leonard stuff. Just the settings, get rid of it as much as you can. If you describe the room already, it's a brothel, it's a room. We were in the room, she looked around, squinted, that kind of stuff, then shrugged. It's way too much. Again, I'm not sure why the prostitute cares about anyone but themselves. And then you've got the brothel madam almost not taking in a pretty young girl as a prostitute. That doesn't make any sense. I'm assuming prostitutes and madams don't give a shit about anyone. They're not exactly the lowest of low, but they're already engaged in illegal activity. There's no reason a madam wouldn't take in a prostitute who was going to bring in money. And he uses phrase, guys in the basement of my brain, and you use it twice. I wouldn't even use it once. Okay, the jacket stamp, but I thought about that and I realized, I guess it was, you described the rain, so the jacket is still damp, that kind of thing. Okay, they use this phrase when the private investigator talks to the police. We always manage to avoid one another. See, I'm not going to go over the grammar, but now it looked like I was a northbound train on his southbound track, and we were both headed for the same station. No, way too wordy. Describes a Liberty device. Okay, then you got Captain Save-A-Ho acting out of character. I turned to Tracy. Funny how you guys say John when you talk about the fellows that pay money to bang you. Most guys use John to talk about a bathroom. Too wordy. Black hand cannon describing his Liberty device. That is a hackneyed, trite, overused phrase that I have read in way too many of this type of books. Hand cannon. It just doesn't. It's been done to death. Just cut it out, because it doesn't matter if somebody's threatening you with a 22 or a 45. You don't want to get shot with either one. The 45 will kill you. The 22 probably won't, but you really don't want to get shot with anything. You don't even want to get shot with something like a BB gun. Hand cannon, so you repeat the phrase twice, absolutely verboten. Okay, so now you're talking about Colombian powder. So that are all the characters doing cocaine? I haven't read the whole thing, but so now you've introduced a hard element to the story, a fact. Cocaine, we know they're doing central nervous system stimulants. People on cocaine are stimulated. They probably talk faster. I've never done cocaine. I don't do drugs, but I've seen people do it, and they are a little bit more fast, jittery. It's the opposite of a depressant. It's like coffee versus, I don't know, a sleeping pill or something like that. So you've got to have people act in character with cocaine, and cocaine doesn't have people nod out. That's what opiates do. Okay, prostitutes, I'm not sure why a prostitute would pay money to take care of another prostitute, unless there's some strong motivation in it. Even if there were friends, it's like, well, she's dead. Does she really want revenge? It's like, I would think prostitutes would just accept that as part of the job. Johns kill prostitutes. Prostitutes occasionally kill Johns. Pimps. It's you're in a violent industry. There's a lot of drug dealing. There's probably weapons dealings, that kind of thing. Okay, so there's this phrase, it wasn't a good out, but it wasn't out. All they had to do was look the other way. I hadn't seen enough to get Vic, and it kind of it goes on and on and on and on. It's like you say something, and then you repeat it, and then you repeat it, and then you repeat it in a slightly different phraseology, and there's absolutely no need to do that. You said it once, the audience knows what you mean. Okay, but he didn't want the police guy to die because I was a witness, and Vic didn't like witnesses. Vic especially didn't like black witnesses, so it's 1, 2, 3. And while I can pass in the right light, describing that he's a light-skinned black dude, blah, 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 he wouldn't think. So you're repeating these concepts over and over and over again. Shorten this up as much as possible. Vic didn't... the concept is that the Vic wouldn't leave you alive if you were the only witness to a crime, something like that. So make it as short as possible, but no shorter. Okay, so this is the one use of the N-bomb that is probably appropriate, though you do repeat two similar concepts black and the N-bomb, and then bitch. So it's like 3 words describing that one woman is angry at another woman. So yeah, maybe she dropped the N-bomb, or maybe she just called her a black bitch or whatever, something like that. But other than that, you want to limit that kind of language as much as possible. People just aren't into it. And then you use the same phrase, the guys in the basement of my brain kicked out, and that's not a good phrase even once. So I definitely would not use it too. Oh, and then you start getting into very cool stuff. The coins over the eyes, and it gives you the hint that this story is going to be more complicated than it adds depth to the story. It's like all of a sudden you shifted gears and you let me know that this story is going in a different direction. It's deeper than it first appeared, and it's only a few pages in, so it's cool. And then later on, you start talking about the supernatural elements of the story, which is why it reminded me of that guy, Robert R. McCammon, who I'm sure you're either familiar with or you can find his books online. I won't tell you the pirate sites. I wouldn't encourage piracy, but, they're out there if you want to download them. You can probably buy them for a couple bucks, too. Okay, your phrase, this is the Liberty device is held low, casual. So it's held low, comma, casual, comma, but pointing right at my head. Pick a battle here. I'm not sure what's going on here. It wouldn't be the first time a black man had to swallow his words to keep a white man from killing him. Nobody cares. I mean, I know that sounds really harsh to say that, but like we all have our own problems, and it's like logically this doesn't make a whole lot of sense because the violence is the opposite direction. It's black men are attacking white people. The white people are the victims of violent crime. So this logically doesn't make sense. I mean, you can look up crime rates. I think the odds are like 30-1 that a black person is going to commit violence against a white person. So this is a continuity error or a logical fault. I know what you're saying, but it's just, I don't care because it makes us think about, wait a minute, the crime rate's in the opposite direction. It doesn't make sense. Again, you got repetition, talking about streetwalkers starting early. I don't think streetwalkers start in the morning. They're finishing up. They're calling it a night. So it's like you just got to cut out stuff that is repetitious. None of them notice a very white black man. Again, you already described yourself. Like in the first part of the book, describe yourself as maybe an athlete that people are familiar with. You don't need to keep touching on about it. Nobody cares. It's just not interesting. Oh, there's a lot of funny stuff in here, too, about the cop. They're going to go bury a body, and the cop asks the guy, do you have a shovel in the back of your car? He's like, why the hell would I have a shovel? I don't go around murdering people and burying them in the swamp. I mean, there's a lot of funny stuff in here. And like I said, with a little editing, this stuff could be cleaned up. Okay, then you talk something about before I even change gears. Well, is a car an automatic or a stick shift? You got to establish that kind of stuff. Establish it and then follow it up. So you got to be careful when throwing stuff like stuff like this out here without being very, very careful of the logic and the continuity. And then there's stuff like this, like I would probably cut this whole thing out. I think the paragraph starts with about 3 feet deep ought to do it. They're set in the swamp and they're about to bury a body. And he goes into this long wordy thing, this was the hand I've been dealt on this particular Sunday. Someone was telling me God has a sense of humor right now. It felt like one of those in jokes just all this kind of this is nobody cares. This is the important stuff about he's thinking about the motive. He's trying to solve the crime in the back of his mind while he's digging a grave. So the motivation stuff is the stuff is important, but you can cut out a lot of stuff. Oh, and then like you say something like you refer to it as a trunk and then a boot. So I'm not sure if you're in England or somewhere in Europe where you guys refer to trunks as boots and bonnets and that kind of crap. But if you're in America, you refer to things differently, and if you're in Europe, you refer to things differently. So again, you got to pick your battles. You got to either set it in. If it's set in the South, then it's set in the South. People don't talk like that. Oh, then this is like this wordy, verbose, too flowery. I knew that she was just meat at this point. Whatever was in her made her laugh and sing and dance and hate and bang and love was long gone to wherever this. No. This is not to your audience to write this kind of poetry. Oh, then you refer to money as sawbucks and fins and that kind of stuff. And it's like, it's not the 40s anymore. So I'm not that familiar with people speaking like that. Oh, okay. Then you go back into the race stuff, whites and blacks. I would lighten up on all that kind of stuff. Okay, then you fire 3 rounds from a gun. What happens to the shell casings unless it's a revolver? It's like you just want to. You can solve all this kind of editing with a quick. He pulled a 38 caliber revolver from his holster. Okay, well now we know it's a revolver. That the shell casings are in the cylinder. They're not going anywhere. Or he pulled a 9mm. Well, we know 9mm are usually available in automatics unless you have special moon clip, and you can make them for I think, I don't know, 357 or something. I saw some adapters. Anyway, it's a little logical things like this. Oh, you refer to the money as a fin as opposed to a sawbuck, something like that. Oh, then you get into I didn't understand this. He might have explained it later. You're talking about security who was at the brothel. You've got 3 gorillas in ill-fitting suits. Well, where were they when the girl was killed the other night? You've got money to pay 3 security guards at a brothel, which I don't think you need. I don't think most brothels are going to pay 3 security guards. You really only need 1 guy with a couple bottles of mace and pepper spray and maybe a backup gun or extendable baton. 1 guy with a couple bottles of pepper spray is enough to solve most problems, especially, one of those big bottles of pepper spray just hoses down a room. So if there's a fighting in a brothel, you would use, the doors are probably not even locked. You would just open the door, pepper spray everyone in the room, and that would cool the problem out. So why are there 3 security guards now, but they weren't there before? Yeah, those kind of things you got to think in through. Okay, so you've got a fight scene, which is cool. Again, it feels like kind of a graphic novel. So it's cool, but then like a few pages later, you have another fight scene. No. 1 fight scene is fine. You don't need to follow it up with another fight scene. And it just doesn't make sense. You want to let some pounds go by. Okay, you're talking about race. Again, you've got white guys with black prostitutes. I don't see the likelihood of, I'm sure it's happened. Some are probably into it, but I'm guessing it's just not. Most desirable women are Asian and white women, probably blondes. So, and then he describes his race as being 1/8 black or something like that. It's like, you already described it. You don't need to keep following up on it. Oh, okay, now you get into the supernatural aspects, which is very cool. This, oops, I need a better holder for this. So you get into the supernatural aspects, and maybe, I don't know, maybe on the cover of the book, you want to let people know it's going to be more than just a noir book. It's going to be a supernatural, hard-boiled detective book, which is cool. This is definitely, you definitely got something here. But you describe a scene through the eyes of the dead girl when literally just a few pages you describe the exact same scene through the eyes of the guy who was forced to bury her, the protagonist. So you don't need to do that. It's just repetition. So I would cut out all this repetition, her perspective, that kind of thing. Stuff like talking about rum. The rum was no more made for drinking than I was for being a punching bag, but here I look like a mile of bad road, and the rum was being treated like water to a desert island castaway. No, he's drinking rum, shorten it up as much as possible. Then you describe the secretary, and you describe the secretary for a paragraph. Is it relevant to the story? Nope. The guy's been knocked out for 2 whole days. You probably take someone to the hospital for 2 whole days. Did he pee himself? Did he get up to pee? What happens? The police guy's talking about he had sex with a prostitute or something. He says, well, first I got blown by that French number they got at Molly's. Girl got a mouth like a Kansas twister. I don't know if you'd speak like that. I don't know if you talk about your sexual... Maybe some guys would talk about their sexual exploits, but I don't know. It feels a little awkward. Well, first I got blown. It's like, you brought me here back safe and sound. Well, first I stopped off for a BJ, but other than that, yeah, I had to carry your black ass. Well, that doesn't really matter. His color doesn't matter. I know you're trying to establish like this racial stuff going on, but it's that he's heavy. It's not that his color matters. I had to carry someone who had actually broken ankle, and it's like the only thing that mattered was how much he weighed. So again, just cool out with the race stuff. It's just not into it. People aren't into it. Anyway, there's a lot more of this, but I'm already gone on for a half hour. Anyway, this is enough to get started, and this is just where I'm coming from the editing. You can take it or leave it. Tell me to piss up a rope. It doesn't matter. But I've read a lot of this kind of stuff. I've got bookshelves. I've got hundreds of these types of books. Actually, I kind of want to think about getting rid of them because I have like books double stacked and stuff. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, guys, and I'll see you all next episode.